So let's take on two insurrection-related topics in today's video. One, who is the first insurrection defendant scheduled to go to trial and what is he charged with? And two, let's run through the answers to some frequently asked questions about the insurrection defendants generally. Because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So the first trial of an insurrectionist is scheduled for October 18th. It's coming up. And the name of the defendant is Aaron Mostofsky. This guy, a real peach. Here's the reporting about Mostofsky's arrest back when it happened. This from the Daily Beast. New York judge's son, pictured at Capitol riot in fur pelts police gear, is arrested. And that article begins, a Brooklyn judge's son, who was pictured at the attack on the U.S. Capitol wearing fur pelts and carrying police gear, was arrested by the FBI. 34-year-old Aaron Mostofsky was seen in multiple photos from the violent insurrection wearing a bizarre fur outfit and a bulletproof vest with police emblazoned across it. And he was carrying a wooden staff and a plastic riot shield with Capitol Police insignia. And here is the press release from the Department of Justice talking about the charges that have been indicted against Aaron Mostofsky. His case number, for those of you scoring at home, is 1:21-CR-138. He's charged with civil disorder, obstruction of an official proceeding, assaulting, resisting, or impeding police officers, theft of government property, and 4 other crimes. Now, friends, the one thing I can promise you is I'll be in court every day during Aaron Mostofsky's insurrection trial. I'll be reporting, I'll be giving legal analysis, I'll be tweeting, I'll be posting, and I'll be trying to keep you up to speed in real time about what's going on in the Mostofsky trial. Because this is our democracy, and this guy tried to take it. This guy tried to take our democracy. This guy was commanded by Donald Trump to go to the U.S. Capitol and stop the certification of Joe Biden's win. And it didn't happen. And it's not going to happen. And we are going to stay on top of this insurrection case and every insurrection case to make sure our democracy remains protected. So let's quickly run through some frequently asked questions about the insurrection cases generally. Number one, people ask, why is it that these defendants who are on release pending trial, not in jail pending trial, why are the judges letting them take vacations and travel and go to weddings, etc.? Here's why. In each case, the judge has to decide whether the defendant should be in jail pending trial or should be on release in the community pending trial. And the judge has to decide whether the defendant is a flight risk or whether the defendant is a danger to the community. And if the judge decides that the defendant is neither, then the person will be on pretrial release. And here's the thing, you can't punish somebody prior to the time that they go to trial and are convicted by a jury. Then you can sentence them, then you can punish them. But when a judge puts them on pretrial release, a judge isn't really interested in or inclined to prohibit them from living their lives, from traveling, from going on vacations, etc. The judges will often set conditions and say you have to inform the court about when you're going and where you're going and when you'll return in case you don't return, in case you flee to avoid trial. But it's not at all surprising that the judges are not trying to prohibit or restrict their travel, because that would be perceived as pretrial punishment, and that's not allowed. Number two, why are the trial dates being pushed so far out in advance? There are a number of reasons for that. There are lots of insurrection cases, and there are only so many judges to try these cases. Frankly, there are only so many prosecutors and defense attorneys to try these cases. Plus, all of the discovery, all of the information that the prosecutors have amassed during the course of the investigation has to be given to the defense, and then the defense has a right to investigate it. They have a right to hire expert witnesses if necessary, and the expert witnesses get to review the evidence and decide if expert testimony is appropriate. All of these things take time. Plus, defense attorneys always want to push, almost always, want to push trial dates out as far in the future as possible. Why? Because witnesses' memories fade. Sometimes evidence gets misplaced, it goes missing, it inadvertently is destroyed. There are lots of reasons that defense attorneys and defendants try to push off their trials as far into the future as they can. And prosecutors generally want cases to be tried as quickly as possible. So that's just some of the reasons why the trial dates are being put so far down the road. Number three, why are some of the sentences so low for some of the first insurrection defendants who are pleading guilty and being sentenced? First of all, the people who plead guilty earlier rather than later generally get the better deals because prosecutors are trying to encourage people to plead guilty early on rather than dumping all of their investigative resources into every single insurrection defendant. So generally speaking, it makes sense for defendants who plead guilty and accept responsibility early on to get a slightly better deal. Plus, a lot of the defendants who are pleading guilty and being sentenced sooner rather than later played a relatively minor role in the insurrection. Maybe they didn't assault police officers. Maybe they didn't destroy property once they unlawfully entered the Capitol. Maybe they weren't threatening people or hunting our legislators or our vice president to try to hurt them. So it makes some sense that the prosecutors are trying to make common sense decisions, as much as it might frustrate us because we feel like people aren't sufficiently being held accountable for what was an attempt to overthrow our government. But that's one of the reasons that these early guilty pleas are being resolved with lighter sentences rather than stiffer sentences. Another question, I think we're up to number 4. Can the statements that these insurrection defendants are making to reporters, can those be introduced as evidence at their trial? The answer is yes. Anybody can talk to a defendant who's pending trial. A reporter, a private citizen, a friend, an associate, anybody, if the defendant is willing to talk to them. The only people that can't talk with defendants prior to trial are government agents, police, investigators, detectives, agents, prosecutors. Why? Because the defendant has a Sixth Amendment right to counsel. So prosecutors, police, FBI agents are not permitted to talk directly to a defendant once he's arrested, once his Sixth Amendment right to counsel attaches, and any communication has to go through the attorney. But that prohibition only applies to government agents, prosecutors, police, detectives, investigators. It doesn't apply to the media. It doesn't apply to private citizens. So when, for example, NBC News 4 DC reporter Scott McFarlane spoke with insurrection defendant Landon Copeland from the jail, and Landon Copeland made all kinds of admissions, those statements can be introduced as evidence against Landon Copeland at his trial, and I predict they will. And by the way, I would say Scott McFarlane is doing outstanding real-time reporting on all of the insurrection cases, and I encourage you to keep up with his reporting. Finally, number 5, and then that will be the end of today's list of frequently asked questions. And it's a big one. People want to know, are prosecutors investigating the funders, the organizers, the inciters of the insurrection, or just the foot soldiers, just the Trump supporters who were commanded by Donald Trump to go to the Capitol and stop the steal, stop the certification of the election? Here's what I can promise you, folks. I investigated plenty of gang cases, and there is no bigger gang case than the gang that attacked the Capitol on January 6th. And when you're investigating that kind of gang case, you can't help but investigate every aspect of it. Who organized the attack? Who funded the attack? Who incited the attack? Who counseled people to attack? Who covered up the attack? Prosecutors, even though they are still on that first rung of the criminal ladder, the 600, 700, 800 foot soldiers who actually attacked our Capitol, our democracy on January 6th, they're still on that part of the investigation of necessity. That piece of the investigation includes investigating the funders, the organizers, the inciters, and anybody who may have covered it up. So I can answer with a high degree of confidence, yes, all of that is being investigated by the 60 prosecutors assigned to this case and the countless FBI agents assigned to this case. That doesn't guarantee that charges will be brought against the funders, the organizers, the inciters, and anybody who covered it up, but it's being investigated. And if I had to bet, I'm not a betting man and my limit is $1, I would bet $1 that funders, organizers, inciters, and those who covered it up will be indicted. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, thank you for tuning into these daily videos. You can also get Justice Matters as a podcast, and just go wherever you get your podcasts if you want to hear the audio-only version of these daily YouTube videos. As always, friends, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.